They nailed my windows. I can't get out. They want me to die." The desperate scream crackled through the 911 recording, making Detective Rodriguez pause the audio with trembling fingers. He'd heard thousands of emergency calls in his 20-year career, but something about this one made his blood run cold. The raw terror in that young woman's voice, the specific detail about nailed windows. It didn't sound like panic. It sounded like the truth. "Play it again," he told his partner, Detective Chen, who was reviewing the fire report from 3 weeks ago. The case had seemed straightforward at first. House fire, 1 near casualty, loving parents devastated by their daughter's close call. But now, listening to Madison Parker's actual words during those terrifying moments, everything felt wrong. The voice belonged to 19-year-old Madison Parker, and if what she was screaming was true, then her parents hadn't tried to save her at all. They had tried to kill her. Madison had always known she wasn't wanted. From the moment she arrived at the Parker household at age 8, fresh out of the foster system, with nothing but a garbage bag of clothes and a broken teddy bear, she could feel it in the way they looked at her. Like she was a burden they had to bear, a charitable obligation that came with a monthly check from the state. The Parkers already had 2 children of their own, 17-year-old Trevor and 15-year-old Ashley. Golden children who could do no wrong, who got new bikes for Christmas, while Madison got hand-me-down clothes from church donations. Trevor was the star quarterback, Ashley was student council president, and Madison was the girl who cleaned their rooms and did their laundry without being asked, hoping that maybe if she was useful enough they might love her too. "Madison, clean up this mess," Mrs. Parker would snap whenever Trevor left his sports equipment scattered across the living room. "And make sure you're quiet about it. Trevor has practice in the morning." It was always Madison's responsibility to clean up after the real children, to stay invisible during family photos, to eat dinner in the kitchen while the family ate in the dining room during holidays. She remembered the Christmas when she was 12, watching through the stair railings as Trevor and Ashley tore through piles of presents under the tree. Madison had woken up early, heart pounding with the possibility that maybe this year would be different. Maybe there would be something with her name on it too. Instead, she found a single wrapped box on the kitchen counter with a note. "For Madison from Santa." Inside was a used sweater that smelled like mothballs and had someone else's name scratched out of the tag. "Be grateful," Mr. Parker had said when he caught her looking at Trevor's new gaming system later that day. "Some kids don't get anything for Christmas. At least you have a roof over your head and food in your stomach." Madison learned early that gratitude was expected, questions were not welcome, and love was something that happened to other children. The worst part wasn't the obvious favoritism or even the emotional neglect. It was the way they made her complicit in her own erasure. When relatives came to visit, Madison was instructed to stay in her room. The converted attic space with slanted ceilings and a single small window that barely let in any light. "Madsen's not feeling well today," Mrs. Parker would tell concerned aunts and uncles who occasionally asked about the foster daughter they'd heard about. "She prefers to keep to herself." But Madison could hear everything from her room above. She could hear Ashley being praised for her art projects, Trevor being celebrated for his football achievements, and the warm laughter that filled the house when she wasn't part of it. She learned to move silently through the house, to anticipate their needs before they voiced them, to make herself so useful that maybe they wouldn't send her back to the system. The loneliness was crushing, but Madison told herself it was temporary. She just had to make it to 18. Then she could leave and start her real life. She fantasized about college, about finding people who would choose to be around her, about belonging somewhere. She studied harder than anyone, maintained perfect grades, and applied for every scholarship she could find. That's when everything changed. The night Madison turned 18, she came downstairs with a stack of college acceptance letters and scholarship offers, her face glowing with hope for the first time in years. She had done it. She had earned her way out, earned her freedom. She found Mr. and Mrs. Parker in the living room watching TV and cleared her throat nervously. "I wanted to show you something," she said, her voice shaking with excitement. "I got into State University and I received enough scholarship money to cover almost everything. I can finally—" No, Mr. Parker didn't even look away from the television. "I'm sorry?" Madison blinked, certain she had misheard. Mrs. Parker turned around then, her face cold and calculating. "You're not going anywhere, Madison. You live here, you work here, and you'll stay here until we decide otherwise. We've invested 11 years in raising you, and now it's time for you to pay that back." "But I'm 18 now. I'm legally an adult. I can—" "You can what?" Mr. Parker stood up, his voice rising. "You think you can just leave after everything we've done for you, the food we've put in your mouth, the clothes on your back, the roof over your head. You owe us, and you'll stay here and take care of this family like you're supposed to." Madison felt something break inside her chest. "Take care of the family? I've been taking care of this family since I was 8 years old. I clean, I cook, I do everything you ask without complaining. When was the last time any of you took care of me?" The slap came so fast, Madison didn't see it coming. Mrs. Parker's hand connected with her cheek with a sharp crack that echoed through the living room. "Don't you dare speak to us that way, you ungrateful little brat, after everything we've sacrificed for you." "What have you sacrificed?" Madison's voice was barely a whisper, her cheek burning. "You've never sacrificed anything for me. You took me in for the monthly checks and the tax breaks, and you've made sure I knew every single day that I wasn't wanted here." That's when she saw it, the look that passed between Mr. and Mrs. Parker. It wasn't anger or hurt or even disappointment. It was something much colder, much more dangerous. It was the look of people who had been found out and didn't like it. "You'll stay in your room until you come to your senses," Mr. Parker said quietly. "And you'll apologize for your disrespect. You live in our house, under our rules, and you'll do what we tell you to do." Madison ran upstairs to her attic room, her college acceptance letters clutched against her chest like a shield. She could hear them talking in low voices downstairs, but couldn't make out the words. That night, she lay in her narrow bed, staring at the slanted ceiling, and realized with horrible clarity that they were never going to let her go. She wasn't their daughter, she was their property, and they intended to keep her forever. The next morning, Madison woke up to find her bedroom door locked from the outside. The year that flowed was a nightmare of increasing control and isolation. The Parkers installed a new lock on Madison's door, one that could only be opened from the outside. They told neighbours and anyone who asked that Madison was going through a difficult phase and needed structure and boundaries. They cut off her access to the internet, took away her phone, and made sure she was never alone with anyone who might ask questions. Madison became a ghost in her own life. She was allowed out of her room for meals and chores, always under supervision. When visitors came to the house, she was locked upstairs for everyone's safety because she was having emotional problems. The Parkers had crafted the perfect story. A troubled foster child who needed their patience and understanding, generous parents who were doing their best with a difficult situation. But Madison wasn't broken or troubled. She was trapped. And she was smart enough to know that her situation was getting more dangerous by the day. She could see it in the way Mr. and Mrs. Parker looked at her now. Not with annoyance or frustration, but with something that looked almost like hatred. They had created a prison for her, and now they seemed to resent having to be her jailers. Trevor and Ashley, now in college themselves, barely came home anymore. When they did visit, they acted like Madison didn't exist at all. The family had closed ranks around their secret, and Madison was the secret they needed to keep hidden. She tried to escape twice. The first time, she managed to slip out during a grocery run and made it 3 blocks before Mrs. Parker found her and dragged her back home. The second time, she broke the small window in her room and tried to climb out. But the drop was too far and she was too scared to jump. Both times, the consequences were swift and severe. Longer periods locked in her room, restrictions on bathroom breaks, meals reduced to the bare minimum. "You're making this harder on yourself," Mrs. Parker told her after the second escape attempt. "We're trying to help you, but you have to stop fighting us. Some people aren't meant for the outside world, Madison. Some people need protection from themselves." It was during that conversation that Madison noticed Mrs. Parker's eyes had the same cold, calculating look she'd seen the night she'd tried to show them her college letters. It wasn't concern or love or even frustrated affection. It was the look of someone solving a problem, and Madison was starting to understand that she was the problem they were trying to solve. The hammer appeared in Mr. Parker's workshop on a Tuesday in late October. Madison only saw it because she was doing laundry in the basement and happened to glance through the open workshop door. It sat on his workbench next to a small box of long nails. Both items clean and new, still bearing price tags from the hardware store. That night, she heard them talking in the hallway outside her room, their voices low but urgent. She pressed her ear to the door and caught fragments of conversation that made her blood run cold. "Can't keep doing this forever. Neighbours are starting to ask questions. Has to look natural. Old house, things happen." Madison pulled away from the door, her heart pounding so hard she was sure they could hear it through the thin wood. She told herself she was being paranoid, that she was misunderstanding what she'd heard, but deep down she knew she wasn't paranoid enough. The Parkers had spent a year turning her into a non-person, convincing everyone who might care that she was unstable and troubled. If something happened to her now, who would question it? Who would even investigate? She started sleeping with her desk chair wedged against the door and kept the small desk lamp on all night, telling herself that the light might deter them from whatever they were planning. She began hoarding the small portions of food they gave her, hiding crackers and granola bars in her pillowcase in case they decided to stop feeding her altogether. Most importantly, she started paying attention to every sound in the house, every creak of the floorboards, every whispered conversation. 3 nights later, she heard the footsteps. It was just after midnight when the soft sound of movement in the hallway woke her from the light sleep that was all she could manage anymore. Madison lay perfectly still, controlling her breathing, as she listened to Mr. Parker's careful footsteps moving past her door toward the narrow stairs that led to the roof access. A few minutes later, she heard him coming back down, but this time the footsteps were accompanied by a different sound, the soft clink of metal against metal. Tools. He was carrying tools. Madison waited until she was sure he had gone back to his bedroom, then crept to her small window and peered out into the darkness. She couldn't see much from her angle, but there was definitely someone on the roof directly above her room. She could hear the soft scraping sounds of movement, the occasional quiet thump of someone trying to work without making noise. 20 minutes later, the sounds stopped. 20 minutes after that, she heard Mr. Parker's footsteps again, this time heading back toward his bedroom. Madison stayed awake until dawn, staring at her window and wondering what he had done up there. But when morning came, everything looked normal. It wasn't until 2 days later that she discovered what he had been doing. Madison was standing on her desk, trying to get better reception on the old transistor radio she'd found hidden in the back of her closet, when she noticed something strange about her window frame. There were small, fresh holes in the wood around the edges, perfectly round holes that looked like they had been drilled recently. Her blood turned to ice as she realized what she was looking at. Pilot holes. Someone had drilled pilot holes around her window frame, the kind you make when you're planning to drive nails or screws into wood. Someone was planning to seal her window shut. Madison climbed down from the desk on shaking legs and sat on her narrow bed, trying to process what this meant. They weren't just keeping her prisoner anymore, they were preparing to make sure she could never escape, no matter what happened. That night, she heard Mrs. Parker on the phone with someone, her voice carrying through the thin walls of the old house. "Yes, we've been having problems with her for months now," Mrs. Parker was saying. "She's been making threats, talking about hurting herself and others. We're doing everything we can, but we're starting to worry about safety, ours and hers." Madison pressed her ear harder against the wall, her heart racing. "Oh, I know it's terrible. We never expected anything like this when we took her in. But we can't just abandon her, you know. We made a commitment. We just hope we can get through to her before something terrible happens." When Madison heard Mrs. Parker hang up, she understood with crystal clarity what was happening. They were building a narrative, creating a story that would explain whatever they were planning to do to her. Troubled foster child, history of threats and instability, tragic but not entirely unexpected outcome. She spent the rest of the night staring at the pilot holes around her window, wondering how much time she had left and whether anyone in the world would care enough to ask questions when she was gone. By morning, she had made her decision. If they were going to try to kill her, she wasn't going to make it easy for them. Madison began to fight back in the only way she could, by preparing to survive. The sound that woke Madison at 2:17 a.m. wasn't the usual creaking of the old house settling. It was the deliberate, rhythmic hammering coming from directly outside her window. Her eyes snapped open in the darkness, and for a moment she thought she was having a nightmare. But the metallic pounding continued, punctuated by the occasional scrape of a ladder against the exterior wall. They were doing it. Right now, in the middle of the night, they were sealing her only escape route. Madison slipped out of bed and crept to the window, careful not to make any sound. Through the glass, she could see the dark silhouette of Mr. Parker on a ladder, methodically driving long nails through pieces of wood into the window frame. Each nail went in with a solid thunk, and Madison watched in horror as her last connection to the outside world was systematically blocked. The hammering stopped after 20 minutes, but Madison could still hear Mr. Parker moving around on the roof above her room. More scraping, more quiet thumps, and then the sound of the ladder being moved away. She pressed her face against the glass and realized with growing terror that he hadn't just nailed boards over her window, he had created a complete seal. No gaps, no weak points, no way for air to get in or out. Madison's hands trembled as she touched the glass. They weren't just planning to hurt her. They were planning to suffocate her, to make it look like a tragic accident in an old house with poor ventilation. She could already imagine Mrs. Parker's tearful explanation to the police. "We had no idea her room was so stuffy. She must have just gone to sleep and never woken up. Poor thing, she'd been so troubled lately." But as Madison stood there in the darkness, something else caught her attention. A smell, faint at first, then growing stronger. Smoke. Her blood turned to ice as she realized what was happening. This wasn't about suffocation, this was about fire. They had sealed her window, and now they were starting a fire somewhere in the house. They were going to burn her alive and claim it was a tragic accident, that they had tried desperately to save their troubled foster daughter but couldn't reach her in time. The smoke was getting thicker now, seeping under her bedroom door and through the cracks in the old wooden walls. Madison ran to her door and tried the handle, knowing it would be locked, but hoping against hope that maybe they had forgotten. The door didn't budge. She pounded on it with her fists, screaming for help, but the house remained silent, except for the growing sound of crackling flames somewhere below. That's when she remembered the phone. 3 months ago, while cleaning out the attic storage area, Madison had found an old landline phone that the Parkers had apparently forgotten about. It was an ancient rotary model that had been disconnected from the house's main phone system, but Madison had secretly tested it one day and discovered that it still had a dial tone. She had hidden it behind a loose board in the wall, thinking it might be useful someday for calling for help. That someday was now. Madison pulled the phone from its hiding place with shaking hands, her eyes already burning from the smoke that was rapidly filling her small room. She could hear the fire spreading below, the sound of wood splintering and glass breaking. She dialed 911, and when the operator answered, the words poured out of her in a terrified rush. "Please help me. My name is Madison Parker, and I'm trapped in a house fire at 1247 Maple Street. They locked me in my room and nailed my windows shut. I can't get out." "Ma'am, please stay calm," the operator said, her voice professional but concerned. "I'm dispatching fire and rescue immediately. Can you tell me more about your situation?" "They nailed my windows. I can't get out." Madison screamed into the phone as the smoke grew thicker and the heat became unbearable. They want me to die. My foster parents, they locked me in here and started the fire. Please, you have to help me. Madison, I need you to stay on the line with me, the operator said. And Madison could hear her typing rapidly in the background. Fire trucks are on their way. Are you saying someone deliberately trapped you? Yes. They've been planning this. They drilled holes around my window days ago, and tonight they nailed boards over it. They locked my door from the outside. They're trying to kill me. Madison's voice was hoarse from the smoke. But she forced herself to keep talking, to get every detail on record. My name is Madison Parker. I'm 19 years old. I'm a foster child living at 1247 Maple Street. They've been holding me prisoner for over a year. The flames were getting closer now. Madison could see orange light flickering under her door, and the wooden floor was beginning to feel warm under her bare feet. She grabbed a pillow and pressed it against the crack under the door, trying to slow the smoke, but it was no use. The small room was filling fast. Madison, help is coming, the operator assured her. Can you break the window? I tried. It's completely nailed shut. There's wood boards on the outside, and the nails go all the way through the frame. Madison was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she realized she might actually die here. Please tell someone what really happened. Don't let them say it was an accident. That's when she heard voices outside. Help! Help me! I'm up here! Madison screamed, pressing her face against the blocked window. Through a tiny gap between the boards, she could see flashlight beams moving around the yard. I hear someone, a voice called out. It was a woman, Mrs. Patterson from next door. There's someone screaming from the attic. That's impossible, came Mr. Parker's voice, smooth and concerned. Madison isn't here tonight. She went to stay with a friend. The screaming must be coming from somewhere else. No! Madison pounded on the window with both fists, ignoring the pain as her knuckles split against the glass. I'm here! I'm in the attic! He's lying! I know what I heard, Mrs. Patterson insisted, and Madison could hear her moving closer to the house. The sound is definitely coming from up there. And look, that window is all boarded up. When did you do that? We had to secure it last week, Mrs. Parker's voice joined the conversation, and Madison could hear the practiced sadness in her tone. Madison had been trying to hurt herself, threatening to jump. We couldn't take any chances. That's not true, Madison screamed, but her voice was getting weaker as the smoke thickened. She could barely breathe now, and the heat was becoming unbearable. They're lying! They locked me in here! But then she heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Sirens, fire trucks, police cars, ambulances, all racing down Maple Street with their lights blazing. Madison pressed her face against the tiny gap in the boards and saw the whole street lighting up with emergency vehicles. Madison, stay with me, the 911 operator said through the phone. The fire department is there now. They're going to get you out. Here! Madison screamed as loud as she could. I'm in the attic room. The window is nailed shut. She could hear heavy footsteps running around the house, voices shouting orders, the sound of ladders being positioned. Then came the blessed sound of an axe biting into wood as firefighters began chopping through the boards that covered her window. Stand back from the window, a man's voice called out. We're coming through. Madison stumbled backward just as the first board splintered and fell away. Cool night air rushed into the smoke-filled room, and Madison gasped it gratefully as strong hands reached through the opening to pull her to safety. The firefighter who carried her down the ladder was gentle but efficient, talking to her the whole time to keep her conscious. "You're okay now, honey. You're safe. We've got you." Madison was placed on a stretcher and given oxygen while paramedics checked her for injuries. Through the plastic mask, she could see Mr. and Mrs. Parker standing near one of the police cars, talking earnestly to an officer. Even from a distance, she could see Mrs. Parker dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, playing the role of the devastated mother. "Officer," Madison called out weakly, pulling the oxygen mask away from her face. "Officer, please listen to me." A young police officer approached her stretcher, his expression kind but sceptical. "Take it easy, miss. You've been through a trauma. The paramedics need to check you out first." "No, you don't understand," Madison insisted, struggling to sit up. "They did this on purpose. They locked me in that room and started the fire. They were trying to kill me." The officer glanced over at the Parkers, who were still talking to his colleague. "Mum, I know you're upset and confused right now. Smoke inhalation can affect your thinking. Your parents are very worried about you." "They're not my parents." Madison grabbed the officer's arm with surprising strength. "They're my foster parents. And they've been holding me prisoner for over a year. Check the 911 recording. I told the operator everything while it was happening." Something in Madison's voice must have gotten through to him, because the officer's expression changed from polite skepticism to genuine concern. "What do you mean, holding you prisoner?" "They locked me in that room every day. They told everyone I was mentally unstable, so no one would believe me if I tried to get help. They've been planning this for weeks. I heard them talking about it, and I saw them drilling holes around my window frame days ago." Madison's words came out in a rush, desperate to make him understand before someone stopped her from talking. "Please, you have to investigate this properly. Don't just take their word for it." The officer was writing in his notebook now, his expression serious. "You said you heard them planning this?" "Yes, and tonight I heard Mr. Parker hammering boards over my window about 20 minutes before the fire started. He sealed me in completely, then they started the fire downstairs." Madison could see Mrs. Parker approaching, her face a mask of concerned maternal love. "Madison, sweetheart," Mrs. Parker called out, hurrying toward the stretcher. "Thank God you're okay. We were so worried when we realized you were still in the house." "Don't let her near me," Madison told the officer quietly, but Mrs. Parker was already reaching for her hand. "You poor thing, you must be so confused and scared," Mrs. Parker said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "The smoke can make you think all sorts of strange things. You're safe now, that's all that matters." "I'm not confused," Madison said clearly, looking directly at the officer, and I'm not imagining things. "Check the 911 recording. Check the window frame for fresh nail holes. Check their story against the timeline. I can prove they're lying." That's when Detective Rodriguez appeared, having been called to the scene. When the 911 operator reported Madison's claims of attempted murder. He was older than the first officer, with grey hair and tired eyes that had seen too much over the years. But when he looked at Madison, she could see that he was actually listening. "Miss Parker," he said, pulling out a small recording device. "I'd like to hear your story from the beginning. And don't worry about anyone interrupting. This is an official statement for a potential criminal investigation. Mrs. Parker's composed facade cracked slightly. Detective, surely you're not taking seriously the ramblings of a traumatized girl? Madison has been having psychological problems for months. We've been trying to get her help, but she's been increasingly paranoid and delusional. Ma'am, I'll speak with you in a moment, Detective Rodriguez said, without taking his eyes off Madison. Right now, I'm talking to the victim. And for the first time in over a year, Madison felt like someone was finally treating her like a person whose words mattered. 3 hours later, as dawn broke over the charred remains of the Parker house, Detective Rodriguez was examining the window frame of Madison's room with a flashlight and a measuring tape. What he found there would change everything. The nail holes around the window were fresh, so fresh that some of them still had wood shavings clinging to the edges. The nails themselves were new, with no rust or weathering, and they had been driven deep into the frame with enough force to make removal nearly impossible. But most damning of all were the scratches in the wood where someone had obviously struggled to position boards before nailing them in place. Detective Chen, Rodriguez called to his partner, who was documenting the scene with photographs. Come look at this. Chen approached with his camera, snapping pictures as Rodriguez pointed out the evidence. These holes were definitely drilled recently, probably within the last week. And these nails? He worked one loose with a crowbar and held it up to the light. Brand new, still has the manufacturer's coating. What about the fire investigation? Chen asked. That's interesting too. The fire definitely started downstairs in multiple locations, and the accelerant patterns suggest it was deliberately set. But here's the thing, whoever started it knew exactly how this old house would burn. They placed the accelerants in spots that would create maximum smoke and heat in the shortest amount of time. But they avoided areas that would cause structural collapse too quickly. Chen lowered his camera, understanding the implication. They wanted the fire to burn long enough to kill whoever was trapped upstairs, but not so fast that it would look obviously deliberate. Exactly, this was planned, calculated, and executed by someone who knew this house intimately. Rodriguez looked up at the boarded window. Someone who lived here. As they worked, more evidence emerged. In Mr. Parker's workshop, they found the hammer he had used, still bearing traces of wood fibres that matched the boards from Madison's window. His fingerprints were all over the tool, and there were fresh scratches on the handle where he had gripped it tightly while working in the dark. But the most damning evidence was waiting for them at the police station. The 911 recording was crystal clear, Madison's voice terrified but coherent, describing exactly what was happening to her as it happened. Her screams about nailed windows, her accusations against her foster parents, her desperate pleas for someone to investigate properly, it was all there. Recorded in real time by an impartial third party. Play the part where she gives her name and address again, Rodriguez told the technician. Madison's voice filled the room. My name is Madison Parker, and I'm trapped in a house fire at 1247 Maple Street. They locked me in my room and nailed my windows shut. I can't get out. Now play the parent's statement from this morning. The recording switched to Mrs. Parker's tearful voice. We had no idea Madison was even in the house. She told us she was going to spend the night with a friend. When we realized the fire had started, we just assumed she was safely somewhere else. The smoke alarms malfunctioned. We tried to save her, but we couldn't get upstairs in time. Rodriguez stopped the recording and looked at Chen. According to the 911 log, Madison's call came in at 2:31 a.m. The first fire department call about visible flames came in at 2:45 a.m. But Madison clearly states that they had already nailed her window shut before the fire started. So either she's psychic, Chen said dryly, or she's telling the truth about this being premeditated attempted murder. The case was building rapidly, but Rodriguez knew they needed more than just evidence. They needed a motive. Why would seemingly respectable foster parents try to kill their ward? The answer came when they started digging into the Parkers' financial records and Madison's legal status. As it turned out, Madison had been set to age out of the foster system on her 19th birthday, which meant the monthly payments from the state would stop. But more importantly, she had been asking questions about emancipation and college, clearly planning to leave the household permanently. For the Parkers, who had grown comfortable with having an unpaid servant who also generated income, Madison's desire for independence represented a serious problem. They couldn't control her anymore, Rodriguez explained to the district attorney the next day. She was legally an adult, and she was smart enough to eventually find help if she got out. So they decided to eliminate the problem permanently. The DA listened to the 911 recording twice before speaking. This is one of the most cold-blooded things I've ever heard. They didn't just try to kill her, they tried to make her death look like a tragic accident so they could collect sympathy and insurance money afterward. What are the charges? Rodriguez asked. Attempted murder in the first degree, arson, false imprisonment, child abuse, and conspiracy to commit murder. And that's just to start with. The DA's voice was grim. When this goes to trial, I'm going to make sure everyone understands exactly what kind of monsters these people are. But first, they had to arrest the Parkers, who had been staying with relatives since the fire, milking sympathy from neighbours and church members who believed their story about the troubled foster daughter they had tried so hard to help. Detective Rodriguez had been looking forward to this moment for days. When the Parkers answered the door at Mrs. Parker's sister's house, they were still wearing their masks of grieving parents. Mrs. Parker's eyes were red-rimmed, and Mr. Parker's shoulders were slumped with apparent devastation. "Detectives," Mrs. Parker said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, "have you found out anything more about what happened? We're just so heartbroken that we couldn't save Madison in time." "Actually, we have learned quite a bit," Rodriguez said, his voice neutral and professional. "We'd like you both to come to the station to answer some questions." "Of course," Mr. Parker said eagerly. "Anything we can do to help." "We just want to understand what went wrong, why the smoke alarms didn't work properly." "Mr. and Mrs. Parker," Rodriguez interrupted, "you are under arrest for the attempted murder of Madison Parker." The change in their expressions was instantaneous and dramatic. Mrs. Parker's grief melted away, replaced by cold calculation, while Mr. Parker's face went completely white. "That's ridiculous," Mrs. Parker snapped. "Madison is clearly unstable. She's been making up stories for months, and now she's trying to blame us for her own psychological problems." Ma'am, Detective Chen said, stepping forward with handcuffs, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As the handcuffs clicked into place, Rodriguez couldn't help but feel satisfied. For the first time in over a year, Madison Parker was finally safe, and the people who had tried to kill her were going to face justice. But the real vindication would come in court, where a jury would hear Madison's 911 call and understand exactly what kind of evil she had survived.